Great. So, hi to everyone who's here. Thank you for joining us. Most of you, I think, I know you either from last week's session or from the previous webinar. And I'm very excited to see that we're starting to create a community of people with names, and some of you even with faces that I know more about. And that's getting me really excited because, as I mentioned before, I think building a community is also a professional community, and also in general, just a community for people with ASD is very, very important to create more awareness and to create and develop the treatment that these people with autism need and their families. So I'm very, very excited for this. Just a few things before we get started. First of all, like every time, I invite whoever feels comfortable to open their cameras. Um, that's a better way also for us to get to know each other. And second thing is you're welcome throughout the session to either write in the chat box any questions or thoughts that you have that you want Karen and I to read, and I will stop Karen in the middle and read the questions. Or you could also wait till the end. We'll have a few minutes at the end, hopefully, for questions. So you're welcome to do that as well. I just wanted to mention that this is being recorded, as well as last week's sessions and the previous webinar, and it's all uploaded to IDA-I's YouTube channel. So you're welcome. I've seen and I see more and more people subscribing. So I'm very happy for that. And you're welcome to send the link to anyone you think might be interested. It could be either other professionals or parents, um, or policymakers. That's part of what we're working on as well. So feel free. And I want to now just introduce you, Karen. Um, and again, first of all, thank you so much for doing this. This is really amazing. Also for me personally, but also for IDA-I and for us to reach our goal, really, which is to help develop the professional community in Ethiopia that works with autism and people with autism and their families. Um, so I just want to say a few words about you. So Karen is a licensed speech language pathologist with over 30 years of experience supporting children with autism and communication challenges. You, Karen, have visited Ethiopia previously. You ran training sessions in schools and communities, including in Addis Ababa. And you told us a little bit about it. Maybe we'll get to hear a little bit more. And as you said, you're hoping to visit again, hopefully soon in, I don't know, September, October, whenever you know, please let us know so we could arrange visits, as you said. So you're welcome to start. And thank you.
All right, well, welcome again, and I'm excited to be here. It's exciting to me to have so many people that are really interested in learning more. Because again, as a speech therapist, knowing that Ethiopia doesn't have a lot of them, that's going to mean other people need to learn the knowledge to be able to help our kids with communication. So I am going to share my screen so that we can go ahead and get started. Actually going to share my whole screen because I hope to show you a few other things besides the presentation as well. Okay, so today's focus is on our talking and understanding, so that receptive and expressive language, and we're going to be talking about a number of activities and things that we can do to support our kids. And I'm saying our kids with autism, but these are also if we have kids with other developmental delays or Down syndrome. All of these are going to be excellent tools for them as well. So we have one slide. I just wanted to review a few extra environmental factors that we didn't talk about related to autism spectrum disorder. We talked about how genetics is about 90% and environmental about 10%. So I just want to give you a few more of those. And then we're going to spend most of the time talking about research-based interventions for language therapy. And at the end, we'll kind of have a brief where to begin. All right, so we did talk about, like I said, that there are environmental factors that impact whether a child develops autism. And again, we don't know how that works, but there's a few things that when they have studied kids with autism, that they've seen some risk factors that were higher. So when there's advanced parent age, so if the parent happens to be older, if there was some prenatal exposure to air pollution or pesticides, that can increase the risk. It doesn't mean it's going to, but it can. Then some maternal health and some birth complications, such as maternal obesity. If a parent has gestational diabetes while they're pregnant, if a baby's born extremely premature, or there are any birth complications that affected oxygen supply. So those are also associated with a higher risk. So those are just a few of the environmental factors when we talked about that. And then hopefully, just as scientists continue to research and try to determine that cause, we'll be able to continue to learn more. I did want to point out, I don't know if you have the ability to access the Time magazine. That's a big magazine here in the United States, but this month they happen to have a special edition, a very thick magazine, and the entire focus is autism. So I have it. I haven't had time to read it all yet, but they go over new research, realities versus myths, just understanding the journey. So it is a fabulous read, and I might try to actually go pick a whole bunch up so that when I come to Ethiopia, I can bring some to some different locations, because it just had a lot of great information. Okay, so today we're focusing on those language skills that are impacted by autism. We know that the receptive language is generally more impacted. We have kids with the expressive language difficulties, whether they're nonverbal, whether they have difficulty with forming sentences, they're only saying single words, and then their ability to socially interact with others and use that language in a social manner. So we're primarily going to focus on the receptive and expressive language and activities and things we can do to support. But really, even though the focus might be a little bit more on the receptive and expressive language, all of these are going to support that social interaction. So while I'm not specifically going to address that as much this time, I think that really just needs its own entire focus. I just wanted you to be aware that the things we are talking about are going to be helpful for that. Okay, so I just want to point out the importance of using those evidence-based or those research-based interventions. So everything that we talk about is something that has shown through research that it's helpful for language skills. And just when we're looking at using that, we know that it's grounded in scientific evidence. You know, we've had researchers that have studied, and yes, it makes progress. And then it helps give some, I gotta move it. I got a bar that's in the way. There we go. It helps us just with some accountability by setting goals. You know, so when I have kids that are in for therapy, you know, I have certain goals that I set for them, and then it helps. Then I have time. Then I'm working to measure those goals. Are they making progress? Do I need to make adjustments? And then just be able to monitor that progress. Oops, sorry. Hold on. It went a little speedy. Sorry, it was being slow and I extra clicked. And then lastly, these research-based interventions are going to help us identify different approaches and techniques and allow for us to tailor them, because every child is not going to make the same amount of progress with the same techniques. A lot of times I'm layering them and I'm using multiple. I'm never just picking one. So now we've got a few more people. Before we begin, I just wanted to add with the techniques, I wanted to just mention I am at my school, and last time this happened, but we had an announcement come over. And so if I potentially have to mute because the announcements are very loud, if they do happen, I will just put it on mute momentarily and hold up my finger, like, let me just let them talk. Secondly, they did mention that later today, there's going to be a fire drill practice, of course, on the day we're presenting. But I did ask if for the time, and it seems as if it's going to be after our presentation. But if potentially I have to put it on mute, I might just have to briefly take my laptop and walk out the building, and we'll be able to finish. So hopefully that won't happen, but I did want to make you aware that that's a potential. Okay, so one important thing for our children with autism is play-based learning. So this is opposed to a really structured type of therapy where I'm sitting at a table and a child is sitting right next to me. We're doing something very structured and drill. So play-based learning is very effective for younger children with all disabilities and our kids with autism. And play-based learning is going to help enhance that social interaction, because we're sitting down there with them, we're playing with them, and it's in a natural setting. So if a child was just sitting with me at a table, that's not a very natural setting, and it's not going to carry over as well. So that natural, that play, that social interaction, it's really going to help boost those communication skills. Our kids with autism also are often lacking in that imagination and creativity. They're very literal, and so play gives us the opportunity to help encourage them to start boosting that imagination and creativity through things such as pretend play. And then also, our kids with autism also have those significant sensory needs. So when we're doing play-based activities, that's going to aid in that sensory development. It's going to support that emotional regulation that we talked about, that the kids use that sensory development for, and it's going to continue to help with cognitive growth and just being engaged. And so, just why is it effective? So just because the kids are actively engaged. So our kids with autism, they, as we talked about the last time, they learn best through hands-on activities. So when we're playing, we're encouraging them to participate, to explore, and we're often allowing them to choose some toys and activities they're interested in. So if we're sitting down on the floor with them, or even playing a toy at a table, we're going to get those social interaction skills. We're going to work on vocabulary expansion. And we are also going to be able to work on narrative skills. So these are each some topics that we're going to talk about in depth more, but I'm just going to point out these were just kind of some reasons of why we can look at play-based activities as effective. Okay, so one technique that we're going to talk about is called the enhanced milieu teaching. I can tell you I never ever use those words, but I did put it on there so that you did know it actually has a name. What I focus on is, and what I use very regularly, is all the parts of this EMT or enhanced milieu teaching. So this combines working in naturalistic teaching strategies. It combines using modeling, combines arranging the environment to encourage language, and it's implemented in places like homes or classrooms or outdoors. And the real focus is on the everyday routines and activities. So the things the kids are already participating in throughout their day. So as opposed to me just bringing in something that's not normally a part of their day. So the main parts of it are: one, environmental arrangement. So this could be something as simple as, if a child has a favorite toy, putting it out of reach. So maybe out of reach. So I might, there might be like a cabinet at my school, and I might take a ball or a car or something that I know they really like to play with, and I'll put it up there where they can see it. And so the child then has to do something to communicate to me that they want that. Now, we're also going to work on following the child's lead and interests, and just responding to any communication attempts. So one communication attempt they might use, if we use the example of I put a red car that they love on top of the cabinet, is they might point to it at first. And so I'm going to acknowledge, even though, and maybe I do know that they can say the words, maybe they can't say the words, but I'm going to acknowledge that I see them pointing. And I might even imitate that. Now, if I know a child can say the word and they're pointing to it, I'm then going to try to encourage that. So sometimes I actually try to make it that I misunderstand them. So if they're pointing up because they see this red car, I might point up too. Oh, we're pointing up. And I just pretend we're playing a pointing up game when I know that's not what the child wants. And sometimes they look at me, and again, if they keep pointing and they can't say ball or car, or they just don't say it, I might say, "Oh, are you pointing at the ceiling?" I might even give them some choices. Then I'll just say, "Oh, car." And then they'll, I might get some reaction. "I see you smiling. You want the car." And then I'll give them, a sentence or a phrase of what they might say. "Red car, car, I want car." So other important parts of this involve using time delay. So a lot of people are really quick to continue to ask kids lots of questions and talk and not give them time. And it's hard sometimes to wait, I know. So a lot of times after I make a comment or give a model for a child, I then just sit there and wait because one, they might have some extra time needed to process that. And then two, some extra time to formulate what are they going to do next. So that's one of the teaching strategies in this. The next one is something called manned model. Again, I don't use that word, but that it does have that is the technique name. And that's asking the child to request something and then providing a model. So I see that they're pointing at the red car. And so then I might say, "Oh, you want the car. I want a car, red car." So I'm going to say, "Let's ask for car." And I'm going to just kind of try to encourage that. Or if they just said car, we're going to use a technique called expansions, which we're going to go over in just a few, just momentarily. And so really this is just really a very systematic approach to teaching strategies, by arranging that environment, responding and encouraging, and expanding on their language. So our models are really important to our kids with autism so that they can hear the appropriate language. So let me just, so we talked about that this is going to help encourage some spontaneous communication. And we're going to work with teachers, we're going to work with parents, we're going to work with caregivers. So everybody needs to be doing this. It's not just one. I often, when I have parents saying, "Hey, could I get my child more speech therapy?" What I'll say back to them is actually what our child needs most is for everybody around the child to learn the same skills and to be doing the same activities and to be doing it all throughout the day, as opposed to structured speech therapy time that might work better for a child with speech sound disorders, where they come and sit in my room and they come twice a week for 30 minutes. So we're going to be working on modeling and reinforcement. We're going to be working on building functional communication skills, especially for our kids that are nonverbal. In a couple of weeks, when we have our focus on our nonverbal kids, we're going to talk more about the importance of developing functional communication skills and just giving them the opportunity that they can communicate with us. And I just popped one other example down there. If a child was pointing, this is a ball. We've put the ball in a location that they can't reach, maybe, and we see them pointing at that. We would then maybe just model and say, "You want the ball?" And maybe we even see the child smile. So then we would just model, "Oh, ball." And then we might add, again, if it's a child that's only speaking one word, I might add one word. And I might just say, "Want ball" or "my ball." So in that talk that we were just looking at, we mentioned expansion, but there's another one called recasting. So we're going to look at two things, and these are a very important part of our modeling when we're doing our play-based activities, when we're doing our daily activities. So the first one would be called recasting. Just means that we're going to restate whatever the child said incorrectly, but we're going to model it correctly. So if I had a child that said, "Me want apple," so the proper way would for them would have been to say, I want apple. So it might be a grammatical error. It might be they left out a word. It might be they mixed up the words in the sentence. So for whatever reason, if the way they produce it is incorrect, then we want to model back the correct thing. So for my child that says, me want apple, then I'm going to look right back at them and say, oh, and I'm going to say it the way I want them to say it. So I'm going to say, oh, I want apple. If we're constantly saying you want apple, then the child, sometimes they can get confused with the pronouns. So I'll try to mix it up, but I often try to give a model of exactly what I want them to say. So then the other one would be expanding on their sentences. So for my child that just says one word, my child that says two words, I'm then going to always add a word to that to make it a more complex sentence. So if they said apple, I might add green apple or big apple or red apple. So I'm going to add some descriptive words. I could also add other things, my apple, want apple. So we can use our expanding to then just expose the child to some different language vocabulary, language structures. If they're using 3 words, I'm going to expand and add some additional words. And then both of these are just fostering that natural language growth and working to help our kids use those more accurate and complex sentences. So I know our kids, we can all think of a lot of kids we work with a full range of communication. So again, this is where my sharing just about some different things, you're going to see what's going to work better for one child than another. So they might not be saying anything. So you might not be able at this point to be able to recast or expand verbally. But for our nonverbal kids, we're going to talk about, well, what can we do to recast or expand with some of our AAC techniques. So again, I gave these a couple examples of just grammar. The child might say, me want cookie. We could change that to I want cookie. The child might say, he go outside. We could change a grammar to he went outside. Just an example of expanding. The child might say, doggy run. And so I might say doggy ran if that was incorrect grammar, or I might say doggy ran fast. I might add a color or a size, big doggy ran. So we're just going to add those words, or maybe someone says doll need dress, and I might say, oh, the doll needs a dress. So that's an example of even expanding with some more words. So I did mention adding, so I just wanted to give you a little more information on that one word expansion rule. So whatever level my child is at, I'm going to try to add one more word to make it one level more complex. Now, this is when I'm focusing on the expressive language. For receptive language, it's okay then to have sometimes where you're saying the whole sentence, because we want the child to understand and build their comprehension. So we can mix it up. But again, when our focus is more that expressive language and building that, I'm going to take and just add one word to the child's sentence. And often what I'll try to do is use vocabulary words that I already know they're saying. So for a child that already says more, and for a child that already says cookie, but they never combine any words, I might then use those 2 words and say, and the child points and says cookie. I might say, oh, cookie. I'll repeat them to acknowledge what they said, and then I'll add on more cookie. I might add the child's name. I might say want, but we can add that one word. It doesn't have to be the same type of word each time. You might switch it up. And so by doing this, we're going to continue to help build that vocabulary and grammar because again, we're providing examples. And our kids, when they first start talking, they're using more nouns, mom, and might name toys or some food, or and we're going to start expanding into those verbs, but expanding into those descriptive words too is just how our kids are going to continue to be able to produce longer sentences because they're getting a variety of vocabulary. Vocabulary, by the way, is a topic I could talk about a whole session. So that's kind of on my list of I'd love to do that and just talk about the best ways to teach vocabulary. All right, so another one that I use all the time is called parallel talk. So parallel talk is when I'm sitting down on the floor with a child and I'm narrating what they're doing. So maybe they're not talking. Maybe this is you see a picture of two kids building with some blocks. So I'm going to be describing what they're doing. You put the block on, or if they're playing with cars, you zoom the car or crash, the cars crash. So I'm just narrating what's happening. And I'm trying to give them vocabulary over and over again. Maybe they like to play with the same toys, so that eventually they then see, oh, this is what I could do with my words, or this is what I could do, as I could talk about what I'm doing. So when we do this, we're providing some just real clear examples of language. We're doing it in a very functional setting because the kids are playing, especially when we're using toys that are theirs or in their classroom regularly. So I often, when I go work with students, especially my kids with autism, it doesn't work as well for me to pull them out into my room, work with some toys here, and then take them back to their classroom, because maybe they developed some information or comments about my toys and my room, but it doesn't carry over as well. So I mostly serve my kids in the classroom, because again, that's their natural setting. I go in throughout different times, and I'll talk about what they're doing in the whether they're having a snack time, whether they're having lunch, whether they're doing some learning, and I try to use it throughout the day. Because then I hope when I leave that there's eventually we'll learn this too. It also is a good way to model to staff members what they can be doing. And then it just helps with that language comprehension too. So we're not just wanting to think, I'm trying to get them to say this. We're trying to make sure they understand, and we hear it over and over again. Maybe they don't understand the vocabulary of a prepositional word like on or in, but when we repeatedly say those words and we're using the visual of the blocks, we're putting it on, or we've got a box that we're putting them in, then they're able to correlate and understand what that word means, because you haven't just spoken it to them, they've done it, they've heard it, they've watched you do it. All right, so I put a few examples on here. I just wanted, if you guys want the presentations, any of these, you're welcome. Well, I'm happy to share these with you. So this just had a few, especially if you were wanting to give examples to staff members about some different things, playtime, you're building a tall tower, or mealtime, talking about some sort of food you're scooping, or it tastes yummy, or you're turning the pages if they're reading, and oh, you see a tree. So again, we're constantly just talking about what they're doing. All right, so self-talk is then the other one. So these are going to be going hand in hand when I'm doing activities in the classroom. So parallel talk was talking about what the child was doing and me, but self-talk is when we're talking about what we're doing. So I might use parallel talk and make a comment during play about what the child's doing. And then maybe after they put a block on, for instance, I might say, I'm putting a block on, or I want a red block, or red block on. So I just then I'm talking about what I'm doing. But again, this isn't just for play. You see a couple pictures of some everyday activities. So when we've got parents at home washing dishes, making injera, whatever you're doing, giving a bath, helping kids with a bath time maybe, but you're going to model, I'm getting the soap, I'm washing your hand, wash your hand. Bath time's a great time for our younger kids who are working on body parts.
Karen, I want to
Yeah.
stop you for a second. There's a question.
Sure.
By a woman called, I think, Yerushalayim or Jerusalem. And she asks, she's a psychologist, and she asked, how can you know a child is nonverbal in early stage? Or maybe how early can you know a child is nonverbal? Maybe that's
So we're not able to 100% determine when a child is only going to be nonverbal ever. So we do have our children that, again, because we at the very first one we talked about 25 to 30% of our kids are either nonverbal or mostly nonverbal. So when they're younger and as they're developing through elementary school, I always just go on the assumption that, one, I'm still encouraging them to speak. So I want them to speak because obviously using verbal language is going to be the easiest for them to communicate with everybody in their environment. But in the meantime, I'm going to pair that with the AAC strategies to give them other strategies for their functional communication. Eventually, there might be times when it's been years and years and years, the child isn't saying anything at all, and we may drop a real focus on developing verbal language. But really, we're still using some of these same techniques because even if they're going to only use their AAC strategies, I'm still going to use parallel talk. I'm still going to use self-talk. So the answer is we don't know at a young age, and we just have to keep using strategies, which is why we pair them together and don't try to do one or the other, because adding those AAC in, if they are going to be verbal, adding any type of AAC or visuals is going to actually help the verbal. That's what all the research shows, is if you took that away, the kids with autism are going to learn that are going to be verbal are going to learn it slower. So we always want to pair it with someone. Someone asked the question last time of when should we start using it? That's when I always say on day one. Always have. Not. And again, in 2 sessions, we have a whole focus on nonverbal. So we're going to go really in depth, and I'll have some other activities and a lot of visuals and things that I use that we can talk more about what to do with them. So when we talk about what we're doing in the self-talk, that's also giving verbs. So it's adding new vocabulary. And then again, that we're just trying to encourage them that when you're doing an activity, you can talk. So as opposed to if they only saw a parent cooking or washing dishes and the parent was silent all the time, that's kind of teaching our children we're quiet during that. But if all throughout the day they hear their mom or their dad or their teacher, talking about the activities they're doing or talking about what they're doing, we're giving a model to them that this is what we want them to do. So I've tried to include a couple things so that if you guys were to take this later and maybe try to be able to show some others that I've added a few examples to this. Again, what you're doing. I'm pouring, I'm making, you could talk about I'm drinking it. The tea is hot. Okay, so one thing that I have to talk with my teachers a lot is the teachers are trying to encourage some verbal communication, but they end up asking too many questions. And when you're asking kids a lot of questions, what is that? What do you want? What color do you want? If constantly all you're doing is asking questions, then it puts a lot of pressure on kids. And so we want to try to balance that, our comments and our questions. So I usually try to use roughly the 3-to-1 rule, so that if I'm sitting down playing with a child, I want to try to use 3 comments to every question. And again, this just is a way to help us be knowledgeable and cognizant that we're not using too many questions. So again, it's going to reduce the pressure on the child. It's going to encourage imitation because again, we're not putting pressure on them to say this, and it's going to just help foster some spontaneous language. So in this picture, you can see this was kind of with some cars. So, I might just be making some comments while we're playing. My car's red. That's a fast car. And then, one might be, want to race? There's a question in there. And then go back to making comments. So really trying to balance and make a point not to ask too many questions. And, but yes, I see that a lot with my teachers, and that's one thing that we have to work on. So while we're doing all of this modeling, whether it be parallel talk or sometimes not our self-talk, because we would be up in our everyday activities, but when we're doing play activities, getting on our child's level as often as possible is most helpful. So I don't necessarily even think about it, but you can see there were some little guys that were at the school, and my first instinct was to squat down with the puppet I had so that I was right at their level. And if you think about, if you're trying to have a conversation with an adult and you're sitting and they're standing, it's a little awkward. So the same thing for our children. So when we get at their level, that it helps increase the attention and focus because we're right with them in a close physical proximity. It builds a stronger connection. Our kids are also then gonna boost that active listening because again, we're right with them, and instead of being up here, we're now right with them. And then it's also going to help improve those nonverbal cues. So we talked about how children with autism have a very difficult time either using some of their nonverbal cues or understanding some of the nonverbal cues. So when I'm talking with kids, I try to be very expressionate, make my facial expressions match my words. If I'm excited versus, if I have a puppet and we're talking about, oh, the puppet's sad, I'm going to make a sad face too. I'm going to change my tone of voice. And so being in that proximity, they're then able to see my facial expressions and just start to hopefully understand that those have meaning as well. Because eventually, if a child, then we want our child to be able to see a facial expression and be able to recognize, well, they don't look very happy, or they do look happy, or they look tired. So what we've talked about so far has been about modeling. And now I'm gonna just go over some structured teaching. So there is definitely a time for structured teaching. And when I'm talking about structured, again, it doesn't always necessarily mean that the child is sitting at a desk right next to me. I can still do structured teaching within the play setting. But our kids with autism in their receptive language have a difficult time with that comprehension of questions. So these are going to be questions, like what is that? Or where did you go? Or who got you that present? Or when did you eat last? And so we want them to be able to understand what each of those means. So this is actually a visual that I have, and I have a whole picture, but I also have this printed out into individual cards. So I might use this as a visual to support. We'll do activities. I might ask simple questions. We might be using toys. We might be using books. We might be just using other, just a broad range of activities. And if I need to, I offer them a choice of two. So for a child of mine that I ask a where question, like, where did you go? And they say, mommy. So they didn't give me a location. They gave me a who, a person. And that's telling me they don't understand what where means. So that's when definitely having a visual. So this picture, this where picture has a few different locations. So that's telling me where. And then I might give them a choice of two. One that I maybe know is correct and one that isn't. But I won't give them a where and a what, because that's going to be confusing at first. So when I'm doing structured teaching, I might just start with one type of question, and the whole activity, the only thing we're doing is where questions. Sometimes we do have some picture cards. I might have an animal on a farm in a picture, and then I might have two picture cards, and I'll say, where's the animal? Is he on the farm or is he in the zoo? So again, I'm giving him a couple choices, and while I'm doing this, I'm building vocabulary because we're talking about farm and zoo. But those two choices then are, one, encouraging them to communicate. That might be the child pointing. If they point and reach for a picture, I might just model, oh, farm, you picked farm. But eventually then, as they get consistent and they're getting, I kind of use 80–85% as my showing me that they've achieved something. So then I'm going to expand. So then I might have a combination of who and where questions. I might just bring out two of those. Eventually, I'm going to just be in conversation working on questions. So we're going to start out at a very structured level, help them teach and understand what each of these means, use those visuals. You might use objects, you might use pictures. But having a lot of repetition, who, I've even had some like little small dolls or but or maybe the whole activity is a who activity, and I have some different different type of people, and we can just keep answering the questions using those visuals, or the kids can point, or they can hand me things. So then the hope is that then when we get out of a structured teaching, then when we're just in the classroom or just at home, and I say, where did your shoes go? They start looking around because they know what where means.
Karen, there's a question
Yeah.
from George. He says, teaching language to a child with immediate echolalia can be challenging, as they often do not understand basic question and answer interactions. I use the pause cue point technique, which is effective for some children. What methods are recommended for teaching language to children with echolalia? He has another question, but maybe first answer that, and then I'll ask you the second one.
Yeah, so our kids with echolalia, obviously, sometimes that's can be distressing to a lot of the parents because or the classroom teachers, because they're just repeating everything you say. So one, I like to encourage too that many of our kids with autism, because their brains are completely different and they learn differently, part of the echolalia isn't necessarily a negative thing, because in a way it's helping them learn. They're practice saying those questions. But obviously they haven't learned the skill of, I'm asking you a question, I want you to answer it. So starting with some things that are highly motivating. So all of our kids, especially when we're trying to teach a new skill, something very highly motivating is one of the best ways to work with that. So I might just be asking a question, what do you want? And I might have two things. I know they love this toy, and I know they would never want to play with this toy. And they might look at that one, they might point to it, they might name it, and then I'll answer for them. Oh, you're going to say, I want ball, I want car. So I will first start out at a very simple level, highly motivating, to try to teach them question means answer, question means answer. Again, this is where those visuals, where the objects can be very helpful. So sometimes I just repeat it, but most often what I find in those situations where my kids are very highly repeating everything I say is, one, I give them the opportunity, like, okay, let's look at that, as they're still getting some language practice, they're still mentioning some vocabulary, but then I'm going to want to teach what answering a question means, and I try to incorporate those visuals and objects as much as possible.
Thank you. The second question was about language choice in therapy. For most of the students there, English is a second or third language. Parents primarily communicate with their children in Amharic, while the children tend to recognize English words due to significant screen time exposure. In the classroom, teachers primarily speak English. I understand the importance of teaching a functional language that supports communication in the child's natural environment. Given these circumstances, which language should be used during therapy sessions?
Well, so I use the language that, especially when I'm trying to develop functional skills, I'm using the language that's at home primarily being used. If I have parents that aren't, speaking English, then I'm not necessarily going to use that as my focus. So that would be, there's one, our learning for our kids with language disorders, improving their language skills, going from one word to two word, or learning vocabulary. And then the other aspect is I'm learning a second language. So learning a second language or a third language is certainly not a bad thing. And I don't tell people, oh, only focus on one, because that would confuse our child with autism. But ultimately, especially for our children that aren't communicating well, is I'm going to focus more on the language that they're going to communicate in the most, and try to make that as functional, develop that. But sometimes I'm adding in, whether it be, I give an example, maybe, so we were talking about when we expand, or when we add a word. If I know that they speak both languages, that's where I might first, if they pointed to car and I've modeled red car, well, then I might model that same thing in Amharic. Hold on. My office goes dark if I don't move. So does that answer your question? So, if you have any more questions, keep asking. So this next one, this is a different technique, okay? So we're kind of moving out of modeling a little bit into something called narrative-based language intervention. And this is really popular that we use. I think we have in just my county, we have about 150 speech therapists for our schools. And so I know a lot of the speech therapists love to use this. So this is using storytelling. It could be books, it could be just making up stories, but we use that to build the vocabulary, grammar, and the comprehension. So we're targeting some of the structure of our narratives, things like the setting and who the characters are and what the problem is and how we resolved it, along with language elements. So this is one that's going to be more focused on our kids that are already speaking, but we can still do some of the components with our kids that aren't speaking very much. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about, maybe I'm going to read a story, but then maybe I'm going to go back through and I'm going to talk about where were they, the setting. So that's getting information with our receptive language about our where questions. I'm going to talk about the who's in there. Those are our characters. And I'm going to talk about the what's the problem? What happened? And then we're going to talk about what things happened in the story, our verbs, and the resolution. And while we're doing this, we're also sequencing these things. So our kids are learning when there's a story, we go in a certain sequence. So if they want to tell you how something is made, like a snack they like, they can't start with the last thing. We have to go in order. So while we're doing all of this, it's again addressing vocabulary and that grammar. We're working on sentence complexity. So we're going to be just depending on the level of the child, we can match the sentence complexity to the level they're working at. And then while we're doing this, is again, I've mentioned before, the naturalistic, the more we can use our language in a natural setting, as opposed to a very highly structured, then the better progress they have. And then we have our kids, they're just more actively participating when they get to help retell the stories. So I've got a few things that I do when we do this. And I put a few pictures to go along with it. So story retelling. So after we've done a story, I might take the book and go back and maybe I read the story the first time. I'm going to take a turn. It's my turn to read the story. Then I might let them with the pictures say, okay, your turn to tell the story. And then whatever they say on each page, whether it be one word, I might then use our techniques of expansion. I might recast if they made some grammar, but often I'm not necessarily trying to interrupt them constantly, because I want them to retell the story and not feel like, oh my gosh, she keeps repeating or changing everything I say. So I'll try to just do that occasionally. But I find my kids, they love taking a turn to get to tell the story. And I'm not worried as much about if they actually said exactly what occurred there. I just want them to be looking at the pictures and trying to initiate. So I use a lot of sequencing activities and sequencing cards. So there's a picture right here you can see of flowers growing. So I might have 4 cards. Sometimes I have 3. I have other ones that are 5 or 6. And maybe they're mixed up. And maybe one thing we're doing is just putting them in order. After we put them in order, I might take a turn to tell the story. I planted the seeds. It grew a sprout. Now it's a seedling. Then there was a pink flower. So again, lots of vocabulary in there, and we're modeling the sequence of events. And then we might have story starters. I was trying to think if I might have a box. Sometimes I use pictures as a story starter. So I have a whole bunch of pictures of some cards that are what's happening. And oops, it got fuzzy. And they'll just be one picture of something occurring, a child's holding some flowers, a person's in a car, and I might start telling the story just from that. Oh, she's picking some yellow flowers for her mom. And then I might give the child turn. Your turn to tell the story. And so we kind of go back and forth and add on to the story. And again, this is obviously something for our kids that are more verbal, but I'm trying to give you a range of activities that we can do with all of our kids. And then another one is called story mapping. And so again, this is where I have some visuals for us to talk about those things. So you can see a couple of the visuals down here, the setting and the character. That's where I would have a visual to go with. We've maybe had a story and let's talk about the setting. Now, if I have a child who's not speaking much, I might have visual choices. Was this happening on the farm? Was it happening at the school, or was it happening at the grocery store? So I might have 3 pictures. And so even though they're not speaking, they're able to choose one of the pictures and still participate in this activity.
Karen, there's a question here,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure I understand the question. So, Getanet, maybe you ask yourself, because the general question is, if I understand correctly, how to work with level 2 and 3 students.
So would that be talking about, are you referring to like a severity of the autism? So maybe
Yeah.
give a little information about what you mean by level 2 or 3. But if you type that in the chat, I'm going to keep talking, and if
Okay.
you get that information, then go ahead and ask me, okay?
Okay. No
All right,
problem.
so during all of this discussion with story, we're going to work on story comprehension questions. So we're going to be targeting those who, the what, the where. Sometimes I even have more than one child, and we'll let them tell each other the story. So I don't always because I try to encourage that social. So sometimes for my kids that are talking, we might use these visuals and let them tell each other the story and pull the teacher out of it. And again, that's going to encourage talking to our peers, because a lot of our kids, they have difficulty making friends and they're not as involved with their peers as we'd like them to be. And then even some story-based art activities. I put a picture on here for our kids that like to draw. We might draw a picture about one of the scenes in the story, and then they might tell me about that scene in the story. We've done the same story in another day, and sometimes we've picked different ones and made a collection, or maybe I drew a picture. But again, some kids enjoy doing that. I've even used other things that I've already pre-prepared that they could glue onto a page. And so it wasn't necessarily that they had to draw it, but they could put together, again, if it was, I'm going to use the example of a farm story, maybe I had some pictures of a couple animals in a barn. And so maybe they got to glue them on or draw the sun. And then that was something they could then take home. So on the
There's another
subject, yeah.
question.
Mhm.
Jerusalem is asking if there's any other type of test or evaluation that you could use that's not a AAC device to know if the child is nonverbal.
So the only way we will know if a child is going to be nonverbal, meaning for the rest of their life that they're not going to be a talking child, is just time. So there isn't anything that we can look at a child when they're 2 or 3 or 4 and determine if they're nonverbal. I had one of my students who was he was maybe 8, and he really hadn't spoken a lot, but then he started to imitate some sounds. And then he was making some car noises, and he was making some animal sounds, that kind of stuff. And then when he started to imitate some sounds, then we started to put some together, and then he actually started to learn some words. So sometimes we have kids, which I didn't really put anything in about this, but sometimes we just want our kids to get that skill of imitation. So I drop down from the verbal language to other things. It may just be actions. I may be singing a song like the wheels on the bus go round and round, or the doors go open and shut. So I might be using actions because a lot of kids I can get to imitate actions. So I'm trying to teach them, hey, when I do something, I want you to imitate. Then I might add in animal noises or car noises, brum, 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 so sometimes the kids will imitate those because those aren't as difficult for them. And even just other sounds, like if something tastes good, rubbing my tummy and saying, mmm. So some of those are easier for kids to say. So I'll even use those for my kids that aren't speaking very much and trying to get them to imitate that. Because if they're not imitating those, then they're probably not going to imitate my words. But no, there isn't a test or evaluation to determine. And so I just always assume competence. I always assume that this child is going to be a talker, and I am actively working and pushing for that. But I'm not counting on it, because I know that there are a number of our kids that are either going to be minimally verbal or are not going to speak. And all the speech therapy in the world and all the modeling and all the reading and all the activities are not going to make them speakers. It's just how their brain was developed, and how they are communicating. So reading, we were talking about some of this narrative based, where it's more story focused and the sequencing and the parts of the story. But if I have a parent that says, what is the best thing I can do to develop my child's language? I say reading. Reading really is a very positive thing. So it works on vocabulary, it works on comprehension, it works on critical thinking. We're getting exposed to a variety of language structures, and improving our listening and speaking skills. So I've got kids that can't attend very well. And so I'm going to bring in some different books that have some interactive features, but I'm really trying to get them attending and getting that joint focus and attention. So just a few strategies that I use when reading is I encourage that storytelling and conversation. So I don't want to just read the book, and if they interrupt me, I don't necessarily look at them and say, shh, let me finish the story, or don't interrupt. Okay, so I'm looking at reading and storytelling as an interactive activity with the child. And if they make a comment on the page, we stop and acknowledge that. If the page gets turned and they see a monkey in the tree and they point it, say monkey, and then I'm going to stop and be like, oh, the monkey, and I might expand on that. Monkey's in the tree. Oh, and then I might point to something I see on the page. Oh, bird is flying. And then I'll go back to the story. So again, expand on anything they say, use repetition. So that's why I really like to use any books with repetitive lines, books that repeat. I create a lot of my own books because there's certain sentence structures I want to use. So I put a picture in there. I might print it out. I might laminate it. I have some ones that I make create interactive pieces. I'm going to show you a lot more of that in our when we're going over our nonverbal kids. But as often as you can find books with repetitive lines, or again, make your own. I've even made super simple books where I just folded some paper into squares, taped or stapled aside, and we just drew a simple picture. And maybe we made a simple book. It might have just say, I see a tree. And then I might ask the child, I give them choices. What should we draw next? And sometimes I only give them choices of things I can draw because I can't draw very well. But, then at the end, we've created a whole book. I see. It might just be an I see book. And it's focusing on that vocabulary. The brown bear book, brown bear, what do you see? I see a red bird looking at me. Throughout the book, that structure repeats over and over again. So once those structures repeat over and over again, the kids are more apt to repeat part of its story. Even if they say, looking at me, they might hear, because they've heard it over and over again. When I work with my preschools, one thing we always do twice a week is a little group activity that always has an interactive story. And by week 2, the reason I repeat it twice is that by that point, they've heard it 3 and 4 times. I don't know how many of my kids are saying, even saying words before I turned the page because they know what's coming, or I turn the page and one of them says the whole sentence, and I'm like, that's right, and then I might repeat it again. So when a child wants to repeat the same book and you've read it 50 times, well, then read it 51 times because it's excellent to hear that. And then starting young, some people think, I can't read to a baby. They don't know what's going on. Read to a baby. They can start learning skills very young. And I never say it's too young to start. And just a few strategies, I kind of mentioned some of them, just really choosing books with simple and engaging pictures. It doesn't have to be a fancy book. Making interactive, talking to them, having them point to things, point to pictures and actions, asking them questions. Again, following that 3-to-1 rule. Not necessarily, we don't want to ask them a question on every page. We might make some comments, a comment on this page, a comment on this page, and maybe on the next one, we'll ask them a question. And then we go back to making comments. So I also wanted to add it in using music, songs, and rhymes. So I have children who don't speak at all, but they will sing an entire song or they will sing parts of the song, but then never speak during the day. I have kids that they didn't sing all year long. And then during the last few weeks of school, they all of a sudden sang the whole song. And I looked at them like, wow. So music can be very motivating. Songs. A lot of times I have visuals of some of their favorite songs. I let them pick, what song do you want? Sometimes I choose songs that have some functional words that I might want to use. Like I have a hello song that talks about good morning and how are you and hello, and we sing that, and the kids have a fun time. But after we're done singing, I then use those words. I'll say hello, and I don't do it singing, and then I say how are you, and so I'm modeling. We sang it, and then I'm modeling. I said it. So I said I'll choose their favorite songs. I'll even make up songs. So I'll take some of the tunes of some of these songs that are just regular and repeat it. And then I might make up songs while I'm cooking dinner or if I was giving my child a bath, or if we're making art. I make up words to it. And so sometimes using that sing-songy voice, then I'd rather a child use a sing-songy voice to me than not say anything at all. So that's a lot of times too, if I'm imitating something and using that repetition, I might not just say more, I might add a sing-songy. So I'm going to repeat it, and I might say more, 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 and I've kind of got a nice sing-songy, and I'm repeating it. All done. I'm all done. And really use that emphasis. And even though it's not necessarily singing, it's still adding some just emphasis to it. So we did talk a little.
And the question from before. They wrote back and they said the narrative language skills are important for building vocabulary. However, my question is how to introduce this method to children with severe autism, as they may require additional therapy before this session. How can we implement this?
So for our kids that, again, have their cognitive skills are lower, their behavior skills are lower, their communication is lower, then I'm going to start out with something as simple as some sequencing. So I might just have 3 pictures. I might have objects, and I'm not going to necessarily worry about all the storytelling. We might pick an engaging story. So I might choose, I do have one of my kids that loves that Brown Bear story. So I might use that book repeatedly, and I don't keep switching the book around, but I might have a picture of just 2 things like characters and what they're doing, and so again, I'll put those visuals with it. And I'm just doing a lot of modeling. So some people get really worried if the kids, like we've done it 3 times and they haven't repeated it. And I say, there's some of my kids that I might do something 200 times for, 30 weeks before they actually do it. And so I just keep providing the model. I keep trying to do things to get them engaged. So I might have to, I may have a plan of, oh, I've got this, this is a great book. This is going to work really well. And the child has absolutely no interest in it. If they have no interest, I'm not going to be able to draw them in to participate. So that's where I give my choices, kids a lot of choices. I might bring, if I am wanting to use a book, or I have some different sequencing cards, then I might, oh, do you want to make an ice cream sundae, or should we do painting a picture? So again, I'm offering them those choices, which is what the page we're just on right now, to try to get them initially even just engaged in the activity we're doing. Sometimes for some of my kids, I'll actually do the activity first. So in my, with some of my kids that are a little bit older, we might make something. So at the beginning of the school year, I know we're going to do something, we call it Friendship Trail Mix. And really, we mix a few different things together, and each child, we call it friendship because they each get to scoop one item into the bowl. So one child might scoop some pretzels, one child, might scoop some cereal, and then we get to stir it, and then everybody gets a cup of this trail mix. So while we're doing this activity, I might take pictures of it. And then I'll use those pictures because they actually did the activity. And so they participated in it. And that's an excellent way to build the sequence. Like, what did we do first? Did we eat it? No. Let's look at the pictures. Which one? Oh, that's right. First, we put the pretzels in. And then we might have a picture that shows a couple, 2 items in there. I'll say, what did we do next? Did we eat it? And again, I'm giving them those choices. Or did we put the cereal in next? And then eventually you might have, stir it, eat it. So that's where I'd start with those children.
Karen, I'm just saying it's 5 to 9.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, so we kind of just talked about choices. We might save this one for, I'll just briefly say I love sorting activities. This is great for vocabulary. It could be objects. It could be, I might have play food and cars, and they might be in a container, and they get to pull them out, and I'll have a picture of a car and a picture of food. And so we're sorting them. And again, that's one way for vocabulary development. It's also, I'm naming the activities in there, but it's a great way to reinforce. And I have tons and tons of sorting activities. So I'll be able to go through that later at some other point. I have a lot of stuff that I'd love to be able to give to you guys and make available. So stuff that, and then as I learn too what everybody needs, especially since I was in Ethiopia before, I definitely like to bring donations with me of whatever I can. So I'll try to bring items that are really helpful. So we mentioned the use of visuals. I'm going to go on past this, but because we've done a lot of talk about using visuals and pictures and objects throughout. It's just, we really want to use our visuals as much as we can to support our kids. Okay, so I'm going to show you 2 things. So these are just 2, now these are activities that can be accessed online. So I'm just going to pop over here, and I just want to show you. So one is called Monarch Reader. So Monarch Reader was actually began as something called Tar Heel Reader. It was actually developed by a literacy specialist here in North Carolina. And the original, they were developing it because there were some older kids, like middle and high school age, who they were at a low level of reading, or maybe they only said a few words. And so they couldn't find books, though, that matched their interests. And so that's where it started. But so this is a free, you don't have to create an account. I just went to this Monarch Reader website, and I can simply click on read a book here, and it will bring up a search bar. All right, so I have already come up with a few. Okay, so I've just pulled a couple up to be ready. I wanted to show you what it looks like. All right, so this is one. I mean, there's over 19,000, by the way, in here. So there's a ton. So it's very simple. There's one picture. Oh, hold on. Sorry.
So for whoever wasn't here before, Karen told us that there might be a fire drill that she'll have to walk out and she'll continue from with her laptop from where she is. So we're just gonna wait for a few minutes until she finds her place, but everything's okay. And we're gonna continue. In the meantime, I'm gonna use this time to say that hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the soon for questions if there are any left. And if not, this is the time to mention the questionnaire that I'll soon send a link to. And I'll be very happy if all of you could please answer it and fill it in. It shouldn't take a long time, it's just a minute or two. And there'll also be a place for questions that Karen will be able to see later on so she can respond to in the next sessions for any of you that are interested. I'll also say for people who missed this, who missed the beginning of this, all the videos of all the sessions are recorded, this one and the previous ones, and they're uploaded to Eye to Eye's YouTube channel. So you're welcome to go onto that channel, subscribe, and then you could see all the previous videos, and hopefully with time there'll be more and more videos and information. So welcome to do that as well. Karen, did you get to a?
We're back on.
Okay.
I just had to get
Great.
out of there. Once I was
Great.
telling Raynana that once a month it's required that we have a fire drill. We have to practice. So all the kids hear the alarm, they have to leave the building. So they hadn't had one in July and it's the end of the month. Okay, so back to Monarch Reader. So I said it's free. I showed you quickly, you're able to search on topics. I like to pick stories that are already 3 stars ratings. So after I read a story, I'm able to rate it. So if it's a 3-star rating, that means people have read it. So this one is just a simple one called A Pond Story. I chose a simple one. This is a pond. Let me get my ducks live in a pond. Turtles live in ponds. Tadpoles live in ponds. Frogs live in ponds. So it's a great one. You see that's how it's got that repetitive lines. And just want to pull up another example. So this one's called I See. And again, this is another simple one. I see a bug. I see a ball. I see a cow. So if we don't have anything around us, this is an option. But what's really great about it is up in the top right corner, you see this download. So I can click the download button. I can download it as a PowerPoint. And now, especially for someone may not have an internet connection, or maybe they're able to, maybe they have a computer and they're able to go somewhere and connect. But once they, especially if the child has the favorite story, because we talked about how, oops. Got a lot of clicking going on. All right, so now it's, you can see that we have it downloaded into PowerPoint. We can actually put it into slideshow mode and present it, and we can read the story over and over again. Or we can, I've printed it out before, especially if it's a favorite thing. I have gotten some lamination or some of those page protector sheets so that we can read it a lot. And but I love the feature of being able to download it when you don't have access to books with simple pictures, when you don't have access to books with repeated lines. And do we have time to show one more thing?
Yeah, of course, whoever needs to go, you're welcome. And as I said before, this will be uploaded to YouTube so you could watch the end if you miss it.
So this is just one other activity. One other thing that you can use that has so many free activities. I use it all the time. So it's called Boom Learning. You do create an account for it, but I don't pay anything for this account. And again, this is a digital activity, but I can also log into Boom Learning on my phone. So again, obviously this requires connectivity, but I did just want to show you a couple things. So what it looks like is I have a library full of items that I've put in there, and these are all free. So there are paid options on there. I never use the paid options. There's so many free ones. So here's just a fun one. So this is spring vocabulary sensory bins. And so there's 4 different choices here. Um, and again, we've talked about our kids that need some interactive activities. So with this one, now my screen happens to be a touch screen, but we're looking for the animals. So they get to look, let's look in the box where, oh, I found one. And then they're matching it. Now, if you don't have a touch screen or something like that, the kids can then point to, oh, where does it go? They can point to it and you can move it for them if they don't have that skill. But that's a fun one. I use it for vocabulary. There's several of these sensory bin ones. And just on a side note, this is an activity that I make actual sensory bins. So I take shoe boxes or containers and I fill it with, there's a variety of things you can fill it with, and I hide things in there and I let the kids pull them out. So that's fun. And then let me just hold on. Something's blocking it. There we go. And just to show you a couple things, um, they there's stories. This is a scene one, I'm sorry. So this one, when we're talking about the narrative language and trying to make stories, I've used this before that. We work on turn taking. So turn taking can be a big deal with our friends. And so one of us gets to put one on. And if they're not talking, I might say, oh, you put the bear on. The bear is in the grass. And then I might say, my turn. And then I'll take a turn. And I might say, you know, I put the giraffe on the bear. So sometimes I've used it for, okay, can you put the snake on the giraffe? So I'm giving them a direction, a command, trying to see if they understand the vocabulary. And then just a couple other quick things, just so you can see all the different options. We talked about sorting briefly, but there's lots of sorting activities. And we're talking about our where question. Where do the animals live? And so we might talk about the vocabulary, the farm, the ocean, the forest. And then I might let them choose what animal they want. Sometimes I'm checking their receptive vocabulary. I might say, can you put the goat in his home? And then they get to put the goat on. And then there's some stories on there. We're going on a safari. What do we see? And then again, this one it's brown. It eats bananas. It hangs on branches. So we're giving them a choice of 2 here, but we have to think about it. Like, where's the brown one? So there's so many different activities you can do. This is the last one. This one is a story one, but after each page, it asks questions. So it was spring afternoon and Sally decided to take a boat ride. Then it's going to ask some questions. Well, what does Sally decide to do? Car ride, boat ride, bus ride. So you see how we offered those choices. And these are the kind of things too that you can do even with a physical book if you made choices for the child to answer. Now, some of my kids, they like to purposely get it wrong because they like it to say whoops. And so they'll smile. They'll choose every wrong one just because they want to hear it say oops. So, um, anyway, so I think that was all. Stop sharing that. Our fire drill is over finally. Let me just bring this back up and then so these are this PowerPoint has information about the Monarch Reader and the website to go to, has a little information about the Boom Learning. It has a link to get to it. And there's also a link that describes more about it. Last thing, Center for Disease Control has a wonderful developmental milestone that starts at age 2, goes up to 30 months. So when we talk about where to begin, this is a tool that you can use to kind of start accessing or determining what skills does my child have and what don't they have. It's not any type of standardized test, but it's something that I can look at a child and see. So here's a 12-month-old, it's kind of got some skills our 12-month-olds should have. But I might go then back to the other ages and see what skills they're they either have or are missing at other ages. So if I have a child who's 4 years old, I might start on the 4-year-old page, but then I keep backing up until I see where they're very successful. And then it starts to give me some clue on, well, what things do I actually need to target? Because you may not be able to target everything at once. So, and I think that was the last one. So let me stop sharing. Okay. So anyways, I know that was a lot of information, a lot of techniques, and there's so many more. So we're just gonna have to keep meeting. That's just all there is to it. We're just gonna have to keep meeting and talking about these things. And next week we are going to talk about speech sound disorders. And while speech sound disorders aren't necessarily specific to autism, obviously as a speech therapist, that's one of the parts of my job that I do. So I did want to, and I know we had more than one question about speech sounds last one. So we're going to talk about what to do, what to look for. We're going to talk about some different aspects of speech sound disorders and how we know what to do next. And then the fourth week will be on our nonverbal kids. So, but if you think of any questions, happy to answer more. And my contact info is also on the last page of the presentation, but we can also send that out to you. More than happy to answer questions. So you're welcome to personally email me as well.
Thank you so much, Karen. Really, this was very informative, as you said, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. And we've been talking about how much information there is and how we can manage to you could teach more. So we have all kinds of options that we'll talk about maybe towards the end of the fourth session of how to continue this further. So first of all, I want to say thank you very much. Since it's already 9:10. I think I'm gonna let you guys go. If there's anyone that wants to stay here to ask questions afterwards, you're more than welcome. I know I could stay, and Karen, if I think you're willing to stay, that would be great. If not, as we said before, fill out the questionnaire, and you could ask any questions you want there, and Karen could either get back to you personally through the contact information or answer it in the next sessions. So the link to the questionnaire I sent out, I'll send it out again through an email. And thank you very much. We hope to see you all next week. And have a good night. And for you, Karen, again, have a good day.